I'll give you everything." But the rancher discovered a dark secret that changed everything. Jack Morrison had always believed that life on the ranch was predictable, and he liked it that way. The wide stretches of land, the early mornings filled with the smell of fresh hay, and the endless horizon of golden fields gave him a sense of peace that the city could never offer. He had inherited the ranch from his father, a man who had spent his entire life tending the land and teaching Jack the value of hard work. The ranch wasn't just property, it was a legacy, a connection to the past, and Jack took his responsibility seriously. Every day began with feeding the animals, checking the fences, and making sure the land remained fertile. Though the work was exhausting, Jack found satisfaction in it. It was honest, steady, and unchanging, just the way he liked it. But that calm, steady life was about to be disrupted by a visitor who appeared one evening, walking along the dusty road leading into town. Jack had been returning from the farthest field, his boots heavy with mud, when he noticed her. She was carrying a small, worn-out bag, and her clothes were dusty, as if she had been traveling for days. There was something fragile about her, yet her eyes held a spark, a mix of determination and vulnerability. Jack slowed his truck and watched her from a distance, unsure if he should stop. He wasn't a man who usually interfered in strangers' affairs, but something about her unsettled him in a way he couldn't ignore. He remembered what his father had always said, "Jack, kindness costs nothing, but regret can cost everything." That phrase echoed in his mind as he decided to pull over. "Hey," he called out, stepping cautiously toward her. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman looked up, startled at first, and then relief washed over her face. "Yes, sir," she said softly. I'm just trying to find my way." Her voice was quiet but steady, with a hint of hope that seemed almost painful. "Brown."
Jack studied her carefully. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, though there was a weariness about her that made her seem older.
Her clothes were simple, patched in places, and her shoes were scuffed. Despite the hardships that were clearly evident in her appearance, there was an undeniable grace in the way she carried herself. She didn't beg, didn't plead. She simply explained her situation with honesty and humility.
"Well," Jack said, scratching his beard.
"It's getting late, and it's not safe to be out here after dark. You can't stay on the road. How about you come with me to town? There's a small inn where you can rest." She hesitated, glancing at the horizon where the sun was dipping behind the hills. I don't have money for a room," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure something out. Come on." He led the way to his truck, and she climbed in quietly, placing her small bag on the seat beside her. There was a moment of silence, filled only by the soft hum of the engine as Jack drove through the quiet countryside.
"What's your name?"
Jack asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror.
"Lena," she replied simply.
"Lena Chen? Lena?" he repeated, testing the sound.
"That's a nice name. You're not from around here, are you?"
"No, sir," she said.
I've been moving a lot. Looking for work, I guess."
"Somewhere I can start over." He wasn't used to people seeking him out for help, and something about her story stirred an unfamiliar feeling in him. He didn't know why, but he felt a pull, a need to protect, to offer her the chance she seemed to be searching for. When they reached the small town, Jack took her to a diner to get some food. The place was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered at tables. Lena's eyes lit up at the smell of fresh bread and coffee, and for a moment, Jack saw a glimpse of the person she could be if life treated her kindly. She ate quietly, savoring each bite, and thanked him repeatedly. After dinner, Jack made a decision that surprised even himself. "Lena," he said, "I have a ranch just outside of town. It's not much, but it's safe. And there's work to do if you're willing. You can stay there for a while and we'll figure things out. What do you say?" Lena looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. I don't know what to say." "That's very generous of you. I'll do my best. I promise I'll work hard and be helpful." Jack nodded. "Good. That's all I ask. Come with me tomorrow morning, and we'll get started." The next day, Lena arrived at the ranch. The sun was just rising, painting the fields in shades of gold and orange. Jack showed her around, introducing her to the animals and explaining the daily chores. She listened carefully, asking questions when needed, and gradually began to find her place. There was something refreshing about her willingness to learn, her eagerness to help, and her quiet strength. Jack began to feel a sense of companionship that he hadn't experienced in years.
Over the following days, Jack observed her closely. She was diligent, careful, and surprisingly intuitive.
She learned quickly how to feed the animals, repair fences, and manage the small tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly.
Jack started to rely on her presence, not just for work, but for conversation, for company.
The days didn't feel so lonely anymore. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the fields, Lena spoke softly. "Jack, I want you to know, I'll give you everything I can. I want to help, to repay your kindness." Jack looked at her, slightly taken aback by the intensity of her words. "You don't owe me anything," he said gently.
You're here because you want to be, and I respect that. Just doing a good job is more than enough."
Lena smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that made Jack pause.
But he couldn't quite place what it was. But it felt like a promise, a commitment that went beyond mere words. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt a cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, life was offering him something new, someone who could share in the burdens and joys of the ranch. Days turned into weeks, and Lena became a familiar presence on the ranch. She was quiet but cheerful, always ready to lend a hand, and Jack found himself talking to her more openly than he had with anyone in years. He shared stories of his childhood, of his father's lessons, and of the dreams he still held for the future. Lena listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally offering insights that surprised him.
Jack began to see her not just as a helper, but as a companion.
The bond between them grew slowly, rooted in trust, respect, and shared effort. Yet amidst the warmth and growing friendship, there was a subtle tension he couldn't ignore, a sense that Lena was holding something back, something important. He brushed it aside, telling himself that everyone had secrets, and that it didn't matter as long as she was honest about the things that counted. One late afternoon, as Jack mended a fence near the edge of the property, Lena approached with a small basket of freshly baked bread.
"I thought you might like a snack," she said, handing it to him.
Jack smiled, taking the bread.
"You've got a good touch."
"This smells amazing." She laughed softly. "I learned a few things along the way. I like baking. It's one of the few things that make me feel at peace."
Jack nodded. "It's the little things that make life worthwhile, isn't it?"
Yes, Lena agreed, her eyes reflecting the last light of the sun.
And I want to be part of those little things, Jack. I want to help, to give, to make a difference." Jack looked at her, feeling a warmth that he hadn't felt in a long time.
He didn't know what the future held or what challenges might come, but in that moment, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe life wasn't as predictable as he had thought. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for trust, companionship, and something he had almost forgotten: connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, Jack realized that this encounter, this unexpected meeting with a stranger on a dusty road, had changed something inside him. It was a quiet change, subtle but profound, like the first hint of spring after a long, harsh winter. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time he felt ready to face it, with Lena by his side.
Days at the ranch began to take on a rhythm that Jack hadn't experienced in years.
The early mornings were still filled with the familiar sounds of roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the fields, and the soft rustle of wind through the tall grass. But now there was another presence: Lena's. She moved around the ranch with a quiet confidence, learning the routines faster than Jack expected, and sometimes even anticipating what needed to be done before he asked. One morning, Jack was preparing to check the cattle near the far pasture when he heard footsteps behind him. Lena appeared carrying a bucket of feed for the chickens, her hair tied back neatly, her eyes bright with focus.
"Good morning, Jack," she called cheerfully. "Good morning, Lena," he replied, trying not to show his surprise at her punctuality.
"You're up early today. I figured I'd get a head start," she said, setting the bucket down. "The chickens won't feed themselves, and I thought I could help with the fences afterward." Jack watched her for a moment, appreciating her determination. He had seen many workers come and go over the years, but Lena was different. She didn't complain, she didn't try to cut corners, and she seemed genuinely interested in learning every part of ranch life. It wasn't just about work for her. It was about being useful, being part of something. As they moved through the fields together, Jack began to notice how she observed everything carefully. She watched the animals closely, learning their habits, and she listened when he gave instructions, asking thoughtful questions. She wasn't just doing the work. She was trying to understand it, to make it her own.
"Jack," she said one afternoon as they repaired a section of the fence, "have you always lived here, on this ranch?"
Jack paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yes, my father built most of it."
"He taught me everything I know. I've never really left this place."
"Must be peaceful," Lena said softly, glancing over the rolling fields. "I've moved a lot.
Always looking for work, always trying to start over. But I've never stayed somewhere that felt
like home." Jack looked at her, sensing a deeper layer to her words. There was pain in her past, something she didn't fully share, but she carried it with grace. He nodded quietly, understanding without pressing her. Sometimes trust and patience were more powerful than questions. Over the next few weeks, Lena became an integral part of the ranch. She woke early, worked tirelessly, and learned quickly. She even started to help with tasks Jack had always done alone: mending tools, keeping track of supplies, and managing small repairs around the property. Jack began to feel a sense of relief, knowing that the work he had struggled to manage on his own was now shared.
One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the hills.
The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the gentle sounds of the countryside. The lowing of cows returning from the pasture, the chirping of crickets, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Lena handed Jack a cup of tea she had brewed herself. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup.
"This is perfect after a day like today." "You're welcome," she replied, smiling. "I like doing things that make life a little easier."
"It feels meaningful." Jack nodded, appreciating her sentiment. There was something honest in her words, something that made him feel a connection he hadn't felt in years.
You've been a big help, Lina.
"I don't know what I would have done without you."
She hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "I told you, Jack. I want to give you everything I can, not just for the work, but for your kindness. You trusted me when I had nowhere else to go. That means Jack felt a warmth spread through him at her words, but he also sensed a weight behind them, a seriousness that made him pause.
You don't owe me anything, he said gently.
I offered help because it was the right thing to do. That's all I ever wanted. I know, Lena said, looking down at her hands, but I want to be more than just someone who works for you. I want to be part of this, part of your life. I want to make a difference. Jack didn't respond immediately. He wasn't used to people expressing such earnest intentions. Over the years, he had grown cautious, preferring solitude over trust. Yet, as he watched Lena, he felt a rare sense of hope. Maybe life wasn't meant to be lived alone. Maybe this bond, however new, could be something good. As the weeks passed, Jack noticed small changes in Lena that made him trust her even more. She remembered the names of every animal. She kept the barns tidy, and she even began to anticipate problems before they arose. One morning she noticed that a section of the fence near the creek had weakened after a recent storm. Without being asked, she gathered the tools and materials needed to fix it, and by the time Jack arrived, the fence was secure. Wow, he said, genuinely impressed. You didn't have to do this, but you did.
Thank you. He gave her. That's what was dog.
I like helping where I can. Jack felt a growing sense of admiration for her. It wasn't just her work ethic. It was her attitude, her willingness to take responsibility, and her quiet strength. She didn't demand attention. She didn't seek praise, but she quietly made a difference every day.
Evenings became moments of shared stories and quiet conversation.
Jack talked about his father, the history of the ranch, and the lessons he had learned about life and hard work. Lena listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing her own experiences in a careful way, never revealing too much, but enough to show that she had faced challenges and hardships. You've been through a lot, haven't you? Jack asked one night, as they watched the stars appear in the clear sky. Yes, she admitted softly. But I've learned to keep going. Life doesn't wait for anyone, so you have to keep moving forward, even when it's hard.
Jack nodded, respecting her resilience.
There was a maturity in her words, a wisdom that seemed beyond her years. He began to see her not just as a helper, but as someone who could truly understand the struggles and joys of life on the ranch. One afternoon, as they were repairing a water trough, Lena paused and looked at Jack. I've been thinking, she said, about how much you've given me. You welcomed me when I had nowhere else to go. You trusted me when I could have easily taken advantage. I want to show you that your trust wasn't wasted. Jack smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder.
Lena, just being here, working alongside me, that's more than enough. Trust isn't something you measure by what someone gives. It's in the effort, the honesty, and the care.
You've shown all of that already. But Lena's gaze was serious. I mean it, Jack. I want to give you everything I can. I want to help you build the life you've always dreamed of. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Jack felt a mix of surprise and caution. Her words were sincere, but there was an intensity to them that made him wonder what she truly meant. Still, he chose to believe in her. Life had been lonely for too long, and maybe, just maybe, he could allow himself to trust again. As the sun set and the sky turned shades of deep purple and orange, Jack realized how much Lena had become part of the ranch and part of his life. The work was lighter, the days brighter, and the evenings filled with a sense of companionship he hadn't felt in years.
But she wasn't just helping him with the ranch. She was helping him feel alive, reminding him that connection and trust were worth the risk.
But beneath the calm surface, a subtle tension lingered.
Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lena than she revealed, something she was keeping to herself.
He didn't push. He had learned that patience often revealed truths better than questions, but he remained watchful.
Despite that quiet unease, Jack allowed himself to hope. He began to dream again, about the future of the ranch, about sharing successes, and about finding joy in everyday life.
Lena's presence had brought a spark back into his routine, and he felt a cautious optimism that he hadn't experienced in years. The bond between them continued to grow, grounded in trust, shared effort, and the small joys of life on the ranch. Jack started to realize that sometimes the right person comes into your life unexpectedly, and they change things in ways you can't predict. Lena had arrived like a gentle breeze, quiet but persistent, and she was reshaping the landscape of his life just as surely as the seasons shaped the fields.
As night fell and the stars twinkled above, Jack knew that their story was only beginning.
There were challenges ahead, questions to answer, and mysteries yet to unfold. But for now, he allowed himself to feel grateful for the companionship, for the trust, and for the small, meaningful moments that made life on the ranch worth living. Life on the ranch had begun to feel like a rhythm for Jack and Lena. The early mornings, the chores, the quiet evenings, everything had a comforting predictability. But as much as Jack appreciated her presence, he couldn't completely shake a small, nagging feeling that something wasn't entirely as it seemed. He told himself it was just caution, a leftover habit from years of solitude. Still, there were moments when Lena's gaze lingered a little too long, or when she seemed distracted, as if carrying a weight she wasn't ready to share. One day, while checking the northern fence, Jack noticed that the gate to the storage shed had been left slightly ajar. It wasn't unusual for someone to forget it, but something felt off. When he asked Lena about it, she seemed startled, her smile a little too quick, her eyes avoiding his. I must have forgotten, she said, her voice light, almost casual. I was in a hurry to feed the animals. Jack nodded, though the small unease in his chest didn't disappear. He decided to let it go, convincing himself it was just human error. Still, he made a mental note to keep a closer eye on things.
Later that week, Jack went to town for supplies. When he returned, he noticed that some of the financial paperwork he usually kept organized had been moved.
At first, he assumed it was his own disorganization, but a lingering doubt crept in. Something about the neatness of the papers, the careful way they had been handled, didn't feel right. He had always kept strict control over the ranch accounts, and suddenly, for the first time, he felt a subtle disturbance. He tried to push the thought aside. Lena had been nothing but helpful. Breaths. She worked tirelessly, learning everything about the ranch and showing an eagerness that made him trust her even more. Still, the small inconsistencies planted seeds of doubt he couldn't ignore. One quiet afternoon, while Jack was repairing the water trough, he noticed Lena standing by the barn looking at him in an unusual way. There was an intensity in her eyes, something he hadn't seen before.
"Is everything okay?"
he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes," she said quickly, her voice soft. "I'm just thinking about how I can help more."
"I want to make things easier for you, Jack. I want to give everything I can." Jack nodded, but a shadow of uncertainty crossed his mind. She was dedicated, yes, but the seriousness in her words and the intensity of her tone felt different this time.
Something had changed, though he couldn't pinpoint what. That evening, Jack decided to go through some of the records he had noticed earlier. He didn't accuse Lena. He wasn't ready to do that, but he wanted to understand. Sitting at the old wooden desk in his study, he carefully sorted through receipts, account books, and invoices. Most of it was normal, but then he noticed a few entries that didn't make sense. Small amounts had been moved or noted differently, in a way that suggested someone had been adjusting numbers. Jack's heart sank slightly. He wasn't angry. He was cautious. He knew he had to handle this carefully. Lena had become part of his life, and he didn't want to confront her hastily without knowing the facts. But the unease that had been simmering now started to boil. Over the next few days, Jack paid closer attention. He noticed that Lena sometimes took phone calls in private, speaking in hushed tones, and quickly ending the conversation when he approached. She also seemed distracted at times, staring out over the fields as if she were somewhere else entirely. A statement, which might have gone unnoticed before, now stood out sharply in his mind. One evening, as they sat on the porch after finishing the day's work, Jack decided to speak carefully. "Lena," he said gently, "I've noticed some things recently that don't quite add up. I don't want to accuse you of anything, but I need to understand. Is there something you're keeping from me?" Lena froze, her hands tightening around the cup of tea she was holding. For a moment, Jack saw fear, or maybe worry, flash across her face. Then she smiled a little too quickly and shook her head. "No, Jack. Nothing at all," she said. "I promise. Shh. Everything is fine." Jack studied her carefully. There was sincerity in her tone, but there was also a hesitation he couldn't ignore. He decided to trust her for now, but his instincts told him to stay alert. The next morning, Jack found a few old letters tucked away in the barn, letters Lena hadn't mentioned before. They were addressed to her from someone in another state, discussing money and plans in a way that felt secretive. He didn't read too much. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but the discovery confirmed that she had aspects of her life that she hadn't shared. Jack's mind was conflicted. He liked Lena, trusted her work, and valued her companionship, but the hidden pieces of her past created a tension he couldn't ignore. He realized that trust, while important, required transparency. If there were things she was hiding, he needed to understand them, not to punish, but to protect himself and the ranch. Past. Jack began to observe her more closely, watching her routines and habits. He noticed that she often spent extra time in the storage shed, checking things meticulously. She also occasionally spoke softly to herself, though not in a way that seemed alarming, more like she was rehearsing or planning. One afternoon, Jack decided to discreetly check the barn while Lena was feeding the animals. He didn't want to accuse her outright, but he needed answers. As he approached, he noticed her speaking quietly on the phone, using a voice that was cautious and deliberate. When she noticed him, she quickly ended the call and smiled warmly, as if nothing had happened. Jack's heart sank. The pieces were starting to come together. Lena wasn't being dishonest in a malicious way. At least, not yet, but she was clearly keeping parts of her life hidden. The realization was painful. He had trusted her completely, welcomed her into his home, and allowed her to become a central part of his life. Now, he had to confront the possibility that he didn't fully know her. That evening, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, staring at the stars, thinking about everything he had observed. Lena had been helpful, kind, and diligent, but the hidden letters, the secretive phone calls, and the small inconsistencies in behavior couldn't be ignored. He realized that life was never as simple as he had hoped. Trust was a gift, but it also carried risk. The next day, Jack decided to approach the situation carefully. He didn't want to accuse Lena or push her away without understanding the full truth. Instead, he focused on observing, listening, and gathering the facts he needed. He continued to work alongside her, maintaining their routine, but now with a heightened awareness of the hidden layers in her behavior. One evening, as they finished repairing the fence near the creek, Jack spoke again. "Lena, I need you to be honest with me," he said calmly. "I know you're hiding something."
I don't want to judge you, but I need to understand. I've trusted you, and I can't continue if there's something important you're keeping from me.
Lena paused, her hand still on the fence post. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of hesitation, uncertainty, and fear.
But she looked like someone who had carried a burden for a long time, unsure of how to share it.
Jack, she began softly. I didn't want you to worry.
I wanted to help, to be part of this place, and I thought it wouldn't matter if I kept some things private. Jack took a deep breath, letting her words settle. He could sense that she wasn't lying to harm him, but her secrecy had created a distance between them that couldn't be ignored. Lena, he said gently, I understand that everyone has a past, but I need honesty. That's the only way we can move forward. Can you do that for me? For a moment, there was silence. The only sounds were the soft rustle of the wind through the trees and the distant lowing of the cows. Then Lena nodded slowly, her expression serious.
Yes, Jack. I'll tell you everything.
I promise. Jack felt a mixture of relief and apprehension.
Didn't know what secrets she held, but he knew that the truth, whatever it was, would change everything. Their relationship, the trust they had built, and the peaceful life on the ranch now hung in the balance. That night, Jack sat quietly in his study, thinking about the coming conversation. He didn't know what to expect, but he understood that life was rarely simple. Trust and companionship were precious, but they required honesty, courage, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths.
He hoped Lena was ready to do that, because whatever she revealed could change everything he had come to cherish.
Bust-ass. As the ranch settled into the quiet of night, Jack realized that the story of their lives was about to take a turn. The days of comfort and routine were giving way to something uncertain, something that would test their bond, their trust, and their understanding of each other. He didn't know the outcome, but he knew one thing for certain. The truth had to come out, no matter how difficult it might be.
The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm, golden light across the fields.
Jack awoke with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Today, he knew, the truth would come out. The bond he had developed with Lena over the past weeks was strong, but the secrets he sensed had created a tension that could no longer be ignored. He had always believed in honesty and hard work, and he understood that trust, once tested, could not easily be repaired. Lena appeared shortly after sunrise, carrying a basket of fresh eggs. She noticed Jack sitting on the porch, lost in thought, and paused. "Good morning, Jack," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of nervousness he hadn't heard before.
"Good morning, Lena," he replied, standing to greet her. "We need to talk today. I want to understand everything. I need your honesty, nothing held back." Lena nodded, setting the basket down. There was a moment of silence as she gathered her courage. She had been avoiding this conversation, hoping somehow the truth could remain hidden. But now she realized that Jack's patience and trust deserved more than secrecy.
"I should have told you sooner," she began, her hands trembling slightly. "There are parts of my past I didn't want to share because I was afraid."
Afraid you might see me differently, or that you wouldn't trust me. But I see now that keeping it from you was wrong. Jack listened quietly, encouraging her without interrupting. He could feel the weight of the moment, the tension in the air, and he braced himself for whatever she was about to reveal.
"I had to leave my last home suddenly," Lena continued, her eyes downcast. "I got involved with people who weren't trustworthy, and I made some decisions I regret. Some of the money I had saved,
It wasn't earned honestly. I never intended to bring that here, to your ranch, or to involve you in it."
I just wanted a fresh start." Jack's mind raced as he processed her words.
She wasn't confessing a crime meant to hurt him, but the shadow of her past could have consequences. He felt a mixture of relief and caution. Relieved that she wasn't lying to harm him. Cautious because he now understood why some of her behavior had seemed secretive.
"Thank you for telling me, Lina," he said carefully. "It takes courage to admit the truth."
"I need to know that you're here now for the right reasons, that you want to be honest moving forward."
I do, she said firmly, meeting his gaze.
"I want to work hard, be helpful, and rebuild trust. I want to give you everything I can. Honestly, this time." Jack took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly. He knew that everyone had a past, and what mattered most was the present and the choices they made moving forward.
"Then we start fresh," he said. "No secrets, no hesitation. We focus on the ranch and on being honest with each other."
Lena nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of relief.
Around in dismay. She could finally be herself without hiding, without fearing judgment. Jack, in turn, felt a renewed sense of trust. The bond they had developed wasn't perfect, but it had been tested and strengthened by honesty. Over the next few days, the atmosphere on the ranch shifted. There was a new energy, lighter, calmer, but with an undercurrent of determination.
Lena threw herself into her work, not just to prove herself, but to contribute to the life they were building together. She repaired fences, tended animals, and even began planning small improvements for the ranch.
Her dedication inspired Jack, and he found himself appreciating not only her work ethic, but her sincerity and willingness to grow. One afternoon, as they were repairing a section of the barn roof damaged by a recent storm, Jack paused to look at Lena.
"You've done more than I could have asked for," he said. "You've shown dedication, honesty, and heart. That's worth more than anything else."
Lena smiled, a mix of pride and relief on her face.
"I just want to help, Jack."
"I want to make things right and be part of this place. For you, and for me, too." Their routine continued, but with a subtle shift. The trust between them deepened, and Jack began to see Lena not just as a worker or companion, but as someone who could be part of the ranch's future. They planned small projects together, fixing the barn roof, planting new crops, and improving the water system. Each day brought small successes that strengthened their connection and reinforced the trust that had nearly been broken. But life on a ranch was never without challenges. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds covering the sky in minutes. Strong winds and heavy rain threatened the animals, and Jack and Lena rushed to secure everything. The barn doors rattled, the animals were restless, and the water began to rise near the low fields. Working together, they managed to calm the animals, secure the barns, and prevent serious damage. After the storm passed, they stood together, soaked and exhausted, looking over the fields.
"That was close,"
Jack said, shaking his head with a small smile.
"I'm glad we handle it together." Lena smiled back, a mixture of relief and pride in her expression. "We make a good team," she said.
"Yes, we do," Jack agreed, feeling a genuine warmth he hadn't felt in years.
The shared challenge reminded him that trust, when combined with effort and honesty, could overcome almost anything.
As the weeks turned into months, the ranch flourished. The animals thrived, the crops grew well, and the property became more organized and productive than it had been in years.
Jack noticed a change in himself, too. He was more relaxed, more willing to share responsibilities, and more open to trusting again.
Lena's presence had transformed the rhythm of his life, bringing not just help but companionship, laughter, and a renewed sense of hope. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills. Pink, and the air was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the familiar sounds of the countryside. Lena handed Jack a cup of tea she had brewed.
"Thank you for trusting me," she said softly. "I know it wasn't easy,
but I hope I've shown you that your trust wasn't misplaced.
Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace.
You have, Lena. More than you know.
Life isn't perfect, but we face challenges together and come through stronger. That's what matters.
They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the colors of the sunset deepened and the first stars appeared in the night sky. Jack realized that while the past could never be erased, the choices they made now defined the life they would live moving forward. In the days that followed, the ranch continued to thrive, and the bond between Jack and Lena grew stronger. They shared not only work but stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Jack often thought about the journey they had taken, from the first moment he saw her on the dusty road to the difficult truths they had faced together. He understood that life was full of unexpected challenges, but it was how one responded to them that defined everything. One morning, Jack watched Lena as she worked in the garden, carefully planting seeds for the coming season. He saw dedication, honesty, and resilience in her every movement. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for her presence and the way she had become part of the ranch in his life.
You've done a lot for this place,
he said, walking over to her.
and for me too. I couldn't ask for better company. Lena looked up, smiling.
I only wanted to help, Jack. But staying here, being part of this life, it's given me more than I ever expected. I feel like I belong. Brask and Jack nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest.
Then we belong here together.
This is our home, Lena. And whatever comes next, we face it honestly, together. The seasons changed, and with them came new challenges and successes. The ranch grew stronger, the animals healthier, and the fields more productive. But more importantly, Jack and Lena learned to trust, support, and rely on each other. Their relationship, once tested by secrets and uncertainty, had emerged stronger and more resilient. One evening, as they closed the barn for the night, Jack paused to look at Lena.
You've changed this place, Lena.
And you've changed me too. I didn't know it was possible to trust again after so long, but you've shown me that it is. Bet. Lena smiled, a gentle, sincere smile that reached her eyes.
And you've given me a chance to start over, Jack. To be honest, to be useful, and to feel like I belong somewhere. I'm grateful for you every day.
Jack nodded, feeling the weight of those words.
Life on the ranch would always be challenging, but with honesty, trust, and hard work, they could face anything.
Together, they had turned uncertainty into strength, fear into trust, and a quiet ranch into a home filled with hope, companionship, and shared purpose. As the stars twinkled above and the night settled over the ranch, Jack and Lena stood side by side, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to protect and nurture.
They knew that life would bring more challenges, but they also knew that honesty and trust would guide them through anything. And in that moment, the dark shadows of the past had finally lifted, replaced by the quiet, enduring light of resilience, companionship, and the promise of a future built on truth.